Well, hello, good morning. This is my latest project. This is a Fender Reverb unit, a reissue. As you can see, it's got the reissue plate on it. And I got this with my 59 Basement kind of thrown in with the sale. And I don't know, it was about a year ago I discovered that the tube chart wasn't correct, and you can see I drew arrows to say switch these tubes. I had the 12H-T7 here and 7025 here according to the chart. But it turns out the way they wired it is that these needed to be flipped. Well, the thing just doesn't have the decay like my old vintage unit does. So I started suspecting, I said, well, did I ever look at the reverb pan? And it is an Accutronics. Can you see that? Accutronics, which is what the originals were. And I wanted to be sure it had the correct decay time, which I think is the C in that code down there. There's a 4AB3C1C. The 4 is the ohms, and the AB, no, the 4 is the type, the AB is the ohms in and out. The 3, I forgot. The C, I think, means it's vertical mount with the inputs on top. So that checks out. I thought maybe they put the wrong pan in, but that checks out. So it does have a long delay. You have an option of short, medium, or long. So that was good, and like I said, I hadn't checked it out before. There may be some better pans out there that are more authentic to the vintage, but that's not my issue. Right now, after I realized they had wired these tubes incorrectly, I started looking at the rest of the wiring, like the input jack. Everything seems to be going to the 12AT7 directly to the grids, and I thought, well, why would they do that? That's not like the schematic. I got the schematic here, and I'm trying to match up everything in this wiring, this new wiring, with the schematic, and it's just not matching. I mean, it's close, but what they did was they took out the printed circuit board from the reissue, and they put in a hand wired circuit board. And I'm not so sure they wired it correctly. I've got the original K6 tube in here, GE, but it just doesn't sound quite as good. So my project now is I think I'm going to take it completely apart and see why they wired it the way they did. I mean, with all the wires connecting and everything, it may be correct, but I'm not absolutely positive. So we'll see if I can make this thing sound better. But that's my new project. Alright. This is, I guess, kind of what I try to get at in these videos, and I want you guys to take note that it always pays to take things apart and investigate. This is the reverb pan. I said you can look up these codes, that code right there, 4AB3C1C, and that'll tell you if it's the right one. You can see Accutronics, Cary, Illinois. And it has the inputs up on the top. This is the top side of it. There's the handle. And what I found, and I think it may be my whole problem, like I said, it wasn't sounding that great. You see the little suspension springs are off right now. So I can take this thing out. The old units have a handle right here that's connected to the bottom of the frame, and it's a little, I think it's spring loaded, but it's a little handle that you can push up against this. It's a little metal thing that pushes up against this to keep it from jiggling around a lot when you're traveling or transporting it. That way it doesn't break the springs inside. But this one, what it has, and I'll show you, it has a piece of foam in there. See, here are the springs. Everything looks good there. I wanted to make sure it wasn't broken. But it has this piece of foam in here. Well, look, the piece of foam is just kind of dry rotted and loose. And I seriously think when it was in there that this was just like laying on the springs and dampening the amount of reverb I was getting. It may have been cutting it in half. So I'm going to take that foam out. Actually, I need to clean it a little bit. I'm going to take that foam out and see if that makes a difference. I mean, I've gone through all this wiring here, and I still have a few little suspicious spots over here that I'm not too sure about. They wired this thing a little differently than the schematic, but it seems like it all matches up after you trace everything. But I don't like the fact that these wires are both going. This is from the dwell and the input. These are shielded wires that they added to cut down on noise. They both go to the same tube socket. And I'm not sure that's correct, but either way, that's what I'm up against. I'm hoping that foam is what my whole problem was. That would be great. But always investigate. And a lot of times you'll be able to fix whatever the issue is by simple stuff. Okay, I've got the reverb in there suspended. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of spring loaded there. And I seriously think that the foam was dampening the springs. And I was not going to take this thing off, but I wanted to look at the transducers in there so I'd read that some of them, had plugs, and that the mod replacement tank was wired directly to these RCA jacks. And I checked this one in there, and the transducers are wired directly to it. There's no plugs, plastic plugs, cheap plastic plugs. So this thing should be fine. But I just think this piece of foam was sitting in there and just laying on the springs. And it must have been in there tight enough, because this thing hadn't moved. It was still in the center. So that's why it always pays to take everything off and look at it. Talk to you later.